Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Hello, this is Phil McKinney, and welcome to this week's episode. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about characteristics of innovation leaders. But one question I get, and I've talked about this many times in past episodes, is around failure. The fear of failure, how to think about failure. Is failure okay? How do you think about failure as part of a performance metric for innovation teams? So this week, we're going to talk about what I would call successful failures. Yes, there are different types of failures. There's unsuccessful failures. You just crater it, you walk away, that's it. But there's characteristics and there's a way to think about creating successful failures. And failures are basically the end result of experiments. Not all experiments are going to work out. Not every idea you come up with from an innovation perspective is going to crush it. You're not going to hit that grand slam home run, bottom of the ninth in the World Series to win it all. You're going to have failures. And you have to get used to the fact that those kinds of experiments you're doing to take a raw idea and put it out there as an innovation that's going to have impact, that's going to change how people work, operate, think, live, whatever you're focusing your innovation efforts on, you're going to experiment. You're going to have to try different things. And as a result, you potentially are going to have failure. So again, this week's episode is talking about how do you create innovations from failure? How do you think about successful failures? And so we're going to cover the three characteristics of a successful failure and answer the fundamental question: does innovation require failure? Do you think an innovation requires failure? And if so, how do you create these characteristics? How do you create successful failures? And that's the topic for today's show. But before we hop in, got my favorite ask. Can you like, share, and follow? Can you like the post about this episode on whatever social media we post it across a variety of our social media channels? Can you follow us? It's the easiest and best way to keep up with what we're doing. And can you share it? Can you let others know about the show? Now, I'm also assuming that you are a subscriber to the show so that you get it automatically into your podcast feed. Now, we've been going on for 17 years. So we're coming up on season 18, started in 2005. Now, you don't have to worry if you subscribe, whether it be on podcast, iHeart, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. We don't put the entire archive on all those feeds. We don't overload the historical context. You get the last, I think it's like 100 shows, 150 shows, which would be about a little over the last 2 years of shows or so. We do 50 new episodes, fresh content every year. So we're here behind this microphone every week putting out that new content. So hopefully you are a subscriber. If not, go ahead and hop on over there to subscribe. So again, follow us, like it, and then share. Let others know about the show. And helps us spread the word, and it helps make people aware of the content. And you may be getting somebody interested in the content that could really benefit from the standpoint of their career or things that they're struggling with, particularly if they're an innovation leader. So with that, let's hop into this week's episode. Before we get started, I want to make sure that we all have the basic foundation. So what is an innovation? My definition of innovation is an idea that is made real. It can be as simple as a new way to solve an age-old problem, or it might involve developing something entirely new from scratch. Innovation's all about seeing opportunities that others don't see, and then seizing them with creativity and hard work and a lot of frustration. Innovators are a special breed of people who refuse to accept that things cannot change for the better. But there are no guarantees that your idea will work and become a successful innovation. Creating a successful innovation requires experimentation. With experimentation comes the risk of failure. Now, let's be clear, failure is not a negative. It teaches valuable lessons about what works and what doesn't work. When things don't go according to plan, failure allows us to see what we need to change to the idea. Maybe we need to tweak it so that it can become a successful innovation. Now, not all failures are the same. Successful innovations requires not only a willingness to take risks and learn from failure, but also a capacity for what Manu Kapoor calls productive failures. Productive failures are the things that don't work out in your favor, but which reveal something new about how the world works or how your problem is viewed, or revealing something more about the problem that you're trying to solve. They're crucial to innovation because they help us think outside the box and expand our perspective. This is an opportunity for true insight. To experience productive failure, you have to fail successfully. Now, it's not always easy to tell if something is a success or a failure, but there are 3 characteristics that can help you figure out if you are able to create successful failures. So, what are these 3 characteristics? Number 1, effort. Did you put your all into this project? Now, let's be clearly honest here. Innovation requires a lot of hard work, a lot of patience, a lot of frustration, and possibly multiple times through a project, you're ready to throw the towel in and call it quits. A true innovator struggles through this uncertainty without giving up hope while holding on to the belief that they can succeed. Now, innovation is about perseverance, and without it, an innovation project will not get off the ground or come to fruition. The innovator must have a strong sense of commitment, even when others give up hope. Now, in my own personal example, in this case of just being able to stick with it, many, many years ago, this is probably back in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, I was the CEO of a supercomputer company called Terraplex, based out of Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. It was a technology that had originally been developed at U of I, and we spun it out into a separate company, and I was recruited to be the CEO. Now, this is all, extremely high risk. It was a new microprocessor design, and let's not forget about what the late 80s was like in startups. It was still tough to get and raise money. We were in an economic recession at the time, so there was tough economic times. But those working on the project were absolutely convinced that we could transform computing architecture. This particular technology around Terraplex is a new processor technology called MISC, or Minimal Instruction Set Computing. It basically took what was an Intel processor and all the other processors out there that had very complex instruction sets and broke them down into just a handful of instructions that would allow it to mimic any other processor. You could execute any code from any other computer on this processor. So we designed the processor, we modeled it, we proved out its capabilities, but we were facing some tough economic times, and we were, basically a handful of people, less than 6, in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, trying to change the world. And again, we didn't lack for energy. We did not lack for belief and hope. Now, the real problem though is that we did ignore some of the signs, the challenging economic times, the the ability to raise investors. Why were the investors not willing to put money in? And at that time, we had a little bit of arrogance. Our view is, oh, they just don't get it. They don't understand processors. They don't see the future. They are risk averse. We could come up with 10,000 reasons as to why our plan was perfect and they just did not get it. We didn't really listen. We really didn't look at it differently. It took us a long time to finally realize that what we were doing was great work. But as I've said many times on this show, the difference between a good idea and an absolutely great idea is typically not about the idea. It is about the timing. We couldn't get institutional investors willing to fund because we were in an economic recession. We were not based in Silicon Valley. We were attacking fundamental thinking around what processor designs should look like. A number of VCs had us come out, and we had to present to professors at Berkeley and at Stanford our designs as part of their due diligence effort. The professors are like, no, this will never work, etc. We did get one venture capitalist, Gary Morgenthaler from Morgenthaler Ventures, came out. He actually flew out to Urbana-Champaign. I think the only reason Gary came out to actually give us any of the time is Morgenthaler Ventures was actually started by his father back in the 50s out of Cleveland, Ohio. And it was one of the very early stage Midwest venture capital firms. So, albeit Gary was based in Silicon Valley, he was willing to come to the Midwest because of his family roots, his history, his father, etc. And Gary came and spent 2 days with us looking at what we were doing and etc. So at this point, we were basically being funded by angel investors, high net worth individuals throughout central Illinois, Indiana, going into Iowa. These were like, one gentleman ran the local Caterpillar dealership. We had bankers who are putting their own private money in out of Chicago. We had high net worth individuals out of Chicago putting money in, and that was what was funding the Terraplex work. But at some point, angel investors are going to throw the towel in. While we still believed in it, we were truly going to see this through. We believed in it. We believed in the architecture. We believed that this was going to transform computing. But when the angel investors threw the towel in, that was kind of the nail in the coffin. You have to kind of step back. So what did we do? We actually bundled up all of our work on the MISC processor and bundled it up into a technology licensing bundle and went about trying to find a buyer, a licensor of the MISC architecture. And we were successful. So Atmel Corporation out of Silicon Valley was very interested in the processor. They took the intellectual property and licensed it and embedded portions of it into existing processor designs that they had underway. That we got some press on it. Business Week did a big article on what we were doing at Terraplex and the MISC processors and etc. But in the end, the question here being, the first of the three characteristics is, did you put your all into this project? In the case of Terraplex, I can tell you, we left nothing off. We did everything. We put it all onto the field. We competed. We worked hard. We had a great team. We had a belief in it. And again, I think if I was maybe had a little bit more experience, keep in mind this was in the mid to late 80s, probably would have pivoted and taken the basic architecture and broken down. So I'm a big believer nowadays of this crawl, walk, run. Break your project down, Do it in small pieces, deliver value early. Don't try to just take one big giant leap to change the world. But did I put everything into this project? You betcha. The second characteristic on successful failures is perspective. What does the experience teach you about what will work and what won't work? Failure is inherently full of lessons. Some of the most traditional, I should have done this instead. More often, though, you can look back with pride on the time you learned something important about yourself. That either your decision making skills are sharper than you thought, or they were more flawed, like in the case of Terraplex. Even if it's not always an encouragement to try again, there's always value in trying something new and then reflecting on what happened so you can learn. And you learn from every experiment. In fact, at our current company I'm at as the CEO, we do retrospectives on every project. We do kind of a deep dive and look at that project to say what went well, what didn't go well, what did we miss in the beginning, what did we learn and uncover. And we make those retrospectives fully transparent and fully available to everybody in the organization. Now, in this case, though, I want to talk about a another specific example of perspective. What did the experience teach you? So, going to go back to my HP days. Early on in my CTO role at HP, I went after to acquire a small company out of Calgary, Canada called Voodoo PC. Now, for those of you who are into the PC world, particularly into the gaming world, you may recall Voodoo PC. Very, very high end laptops, desktops, gaming rigs, very high performance. They consistently won the shootouts from the major magazines on overall performance. Very good designs, custom paint jobs. You could get a desktop Voodoo Omen that could cost you $40,000. This is $40,000 in 2008, 2007. So we went off to acquire them. I believed that the gaming market was going to explode and we needed kind of a catalyst. So we went after them. Now, keep in mind, at this time, HP is probably, I'm going to say $60 billion. And Voodoo PC is, 8 people in Calgary, Canada in a warehouse. So very disproportionate to size. Now, the real aim was not just to acquire the product line, right? But one of my underlying aims was really to inject some risk taking, some creative culture into HP, bring some renegades into the HP organization. Now, keep in mind, I was new in my role as the CTO at HP. And maybe, my eyes were bigger than my stomach from the standpoint of being able to do this acquisition. But we were actually able to successfully close the deal. And the company was owned by two brothers, Raul and Ravi Sood. And both came over to work at HP. Now, keep in mind that, Raul was the founder of Voodoo and had grown the business from scratch, starting right out of literally within a couple of years out of high school, and had been quite successful with Voodoo PC and had never worked really for a company. In fact, I was his very first boss. And I think where we probably could have done better on this case was helping people come into large organizations like that to actually help you be successful. Now, Raul had a whole series of product ideas and technologies that he wanted to tap into. And, through this process, um, uncovered and learned what are some of those opportunities, what are those perspectives that you gain when doing these kinds of efforts, where think of it as almost like a co-innovation project between a very large corporation and a very small startup. HP is all about scale. Voodoo is all about design and elegance and customer experience and online ordering experience and then the personal touch, which isn't really the model that HP was built around. And so there was learning that was occurring on both sides of the table through this process, and it gained a lot of perspectives. But it also opened our eyes at HP about how we could act differently. Now, even today, you can go to HP and you can order an HP Omen product under that brand. So there was a whole series of the Voodoo brand messaging, brand characteristics that we ended up integrating into HP that still lives on today. Now, I'm no longer at HP. Raul left HP, went on to found Microsoft Ventures, and then left Microsoft to become the CEO at Unicorn, which is an on-game betting platform for esports. He just sold that, and now he's actually just received, his first $5 million investment round from companies like Andreessen Horowitz to fund his next company, which again is I guess the best way to describe it is a living blockchain gaming platform. And even though none of us are there, the Voodoo influence at HP still lives. We learned that it wasn't just about the technology, the perspective we gained, the experience that we gathered from this effort of a big company acquiring this little dinky little company was understanding the customer differently, understanding the brand experience and how important that brand experience was. And you can go out to hp.com or you can walk into a Best Buy store and you can buy HP products today that carry forward the brands from Voodoo on everything from laptops, PCs, printers, wherever. And you can look at those now and you'll see that those brand experiences even live on long after any of us that were part of the putting it in place is there. So we learned, and HP has continued to apply it. The third characteristics of successful failures is inspiration. Does this new understanding inspire an entirely different idea than before? Did something spark out of this that became something totally new? Now, there are a few ways a failure from an experiment can inspire new ideas. Sometimes it might lead to lessons about the nature of the problem, which inspires better solutions. Other times it can teach us something about how we think, and this encourages new solutions because we're now looking at things from a different angle. Now, in my own history, the example the story I wanted to share was around a company that I was part of. This would have been 1984, 85. I've talked about this in some previous shows, and that is ThumbScan. ThumbScan was a company that was doing fingerprint biometric security. And this was, again, 85 timeframe, right before my experience at Terraplex, as an example. And this was around, again, how do we create really low cost, highly functional, effective biometric security technologies? You have to keep in mind that biometric security technologies at that time were $20,000, $30,000 per unit. ThumbScan's target was less than $900 for a unit. Now, the technology, it was pretty rough. I was actually brought in originally as a contractor to take the concept, the idea, which is basically in the back of a napkin, and build out its first prototype. So, including all of the optics, the hardware, the software, everything. So, I had a small company in Silicon Valley that I had founded where we basically helped innovators take their ideas off of the back of a napkin and turn it into a product, something that they could mass produce and ship. So I was under contract. Thumbscan had asked for my help, and we had built up the prototype and actually had product built. However, the problem being is great. The innovators, myself, the handful of people who came up with the original idea, we had the product, but nobody was buying it. It was not a product that people were willing to buy. There were a number of issues around it. And this included, things like, uh, were people willing to share the concerns around privacy? I'm gonna put my fingerprint down on this thing. The other is that, the technology was very raw. It took a lot longer to build than anybody planned for. Cash was getting eaten up. We were funded by Frontenac Venture Capital out of Chicago and a handful of other VCs. Um, but when it shipped, it was a good product, but nobody bought it. It just was a technology solution trying to solve a problem. Again, privacy, people were concerned. I'm going to give you my fingerprint. And security was not a big concern in this time in the mid 80s. Cybersecurity was not a thing. The first set of computer viruses really had not been unleashed on the world at this point. And so the company was in a jam. And so, I was challenged to think about, are there other products Thumbscan could bring to market that would be more readily available to generate revenue and could be used to sustain the business until such time as the core Thumbscan product truly became viable. And we came up with a product called PC Boot. PC Boot was around, not so much, not definitely not biometric security, but a way to protect PCs. Because back then there was no security. There was no security in the operating system in a PC. Anybody could boot up a PC, stick a floppy drive in, copy the data off the hard drive, and walk away, and nobody would be any wiser. And people were using PCs for payroll information, confidential, documents, etc. So there had to be a way to protect the PC. So we came up with this product called PC Boot, much less intrusive. We did actually get Thumbscan to acquire a company called Gordian out of Silicon Valley. There was a company that had gone bankrupt, but it had a token security device. And so you could add an additional layer. You could just put the PC boot in, which would restrict the booting process of the PC. You'd have to put your password in before you got to the operating system. You could use a token, so you could do a password and a token. So you had different layers of security. Product was really easy to build. We used actually some of the underlying operating system security work that we'd already done for Thumbscan, and we introduced the product. We did it start to finish probably in 3 to 4 months, where we literally had nothing till we had product available for sale. And this product took off like a rocket. It went on to win Product of the Year that year at Comdex and became the number one security product for years before Microsoft actually decided to put security in the operating system. And it saved the company. It saw the issue. It identified a new problem, a problem that was uncovered through the process of the other failures that we were doing with Thumbscan, trying to build a product, go out and sell it. Nobody was buying it. Why is nobody buying it? What's the real problem? Again, we solved it by underlying and understanding the problem in a unique and different way. So again, the three characteristics of a successful failure: one is effort. Did you put your all into the project? Did you really leave it all on the field? Did you try? Two, perspective. What does the experience teach you about what will work and what won't? Right? Just failing and walking away, that doesn't teach you anything. What did the experience teach you? What did you learn? What's your retrospective on every one of your projects? And you should do it for every one of your projects. And then three, What's the inspiration? When it's all said and done, does this new understanding, the lessons learned, your experience of this project, does it inspire you to go after an entirely new and different idea? What's your version of the PC boot solution that takes something that you got inspired and that you can be successful at? When it comes to failure, remember that experiments that fail are just opportunities in disguise. Take the time to create successful failures instead of simply moving on without ever looking back or learning why the ideas didn't become those world changing innovations that you anticipated. Failure isn't always bad if handled properly. So try celebrating the small wins along the way rather than just focusing slowly on achieving the major milestones. By encouraging failure throughout the process, you'll find that even more innovative ideas are sparked along the way, which then leads to an entirely new way of doing things. Some of the most successful innovations were born from failures. Now, are you hoping to avoid failure? Look, nobody likes failure. It's hard to face, but we tend to beat up ourselves. But are you hoping that you've got some clever way to avoid failure? Look, we're surrounded by innovation. It's how civilization prospers, economies grow, people learn something new, and our species survives. Innovation is the process of creating something new and often better. Are you hoping to create innovations without experiencing failure? Then just stay away from trying to be an innovator. Your likelihood of success has gone to zero before you even began. The only thing inspiring about this lack of trying and failing is that you'll never know if you could have created an innovation that changed the world. With every failed experiment, there's potential for success. But when you walk away from even trying out of fear of failure, you'll never know what could have been. The key to innovation is learning from failures. Without failure, there's no learning, no growth, no correction to the original idea, to the path that should have been considered to successfully transform that idea into a world changing innovation. As stated before, experiments fail. Face it. Part of what innovation is all about is being creative and experimenting with new ideas. But you can't do this unless you're willing to try and fail. So, yes, successful innovations require successful failures. So, what's your thoughts about successful failures? When you look back on the failures that you've had in some of your more recent innovation projects, would they meet the criteria, the three characteristics of a successful failure? Now, I'll be the first to admit, I don't apply this to every failure I've got. I could fail very early in an experiment and it becomes kind of obvious what the issue was. But I'm pretty diligent about doing what I call retrospectives, looking at projects, even successful projects, because you can learn from them, but particularly the failures. The successful failure strategy allows you to set a culture within your team and within your organization to not let just failures just kind of fall into the background. Now, a lot of us would hope our failures would be ignored and nobody would notice them, but looking at them hard, asking the tough questions, looking at what different perspectives did you get? Is there an inspiration in this failure? Trains your organization, trains yourself to look at failures differently, not as some negative knock against your abilities or the original idea or whatever it is. Successful failures is a key part of the toolkit to creating successful innovations. So hopefully you found this week's episode useful to you. Really appreciate you taking the time and joining us on this week's episode. We are on the road in the bus. We are actually visiting way up in the Northwest, up near like 90 minutes west of Tacoma, out on the Olympic Peninsula. Beautiful part of the country. We're up here just for a couple of weeks. I'm doing a couple shows from up here. But we'll be back in the Colorado studio here next week. but doesn't stop us from producing fresh content each and every week. Again, I want to thank you for your time. Time is the most valuable asset you have. You can't save it. You can't put it on the shelf. Time is the most valuable asset you have, and you've chosen to give us your time, and I do greatly appreciate that. So, give us some feedback. Let us know if there's questions or topics or things that you would want to get answered. Drop us a note, phil@killerinnovations.com. We get those emails directly. They don't go through any filters or anything like that. So, and a lot of the upcoming episodes are based on questions we get from that email. So drop us a note, let us know. Also, post a comment about the show over wherever you get your show at, whether that be at over on iTunes or over on Google Play or Spotify or iHeart or Amazon or wherever you get the content. Post a comment, give us a rating, let us know. We try to look at all of them if something new pops up. So it's another way for us to make sure that we're delivering valuable content for you. Again, one favor I would ask is help spread the word of the show. Let other people know about this content. If there was something in today's episode that you found very useful, share it with somebody. You can grab the link at the bottom of the show notes over at killerinnovations.com. Just right click it, copy the URL, and you can forward the URL to any and everybody. That's the direct URL to the audio file. So they don't need to go to a web page or anything like that. They can literally get the audio file directly. And that's an easy way for you to share that content with other people. So, and again, it helps us meet the objective of spreading the word and me satisfying the direction that I got from my mentor, which is I can't pay back all the work he did in my career. I can only pay it forward. And my way of paying it forward is having work in producing this content now for over 17 years and making that content freely available to any and all who might find it beneficial and insightful as you are working on your own journey around innovation and creativity. And with that, we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.